But let's begin with our breaking news at this hour. CNN projects that voters in Ohio have rejected a measure that is seen as a proxy in the battle over abortion rights. They voted down an effort to make it harder to amend the state constitution ahead of a November referendum on whether to constitutionally guarantee abortion rights in that state. It sounds a bit confusing, but we're going to explain it all. At least we have people here who can do that for me. Tonight we have CNN political commentator Jeff Duncan, the former Republican lieutenant governor of Georgia, and Harry Enton, CNN senior data reporter, and Lauren Leader, co-founder and CEO of All In Together. Plus CNN political analyst Coleman Hughes, host of the podcast Conversations with Coleman. All right, here we go. Let me first ask you, Harry, about what this vote meant, because it was a vote no, but it meant that you have a yes when it comes to abortion rights.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, right? Confusing all around, but I'll try and explain it this way. Okay, so pro-abortion rights advocates got a ballot measure on the ballot this upcoming November in which a yes vote would essentially mean that abortion rights would be legalized in the state of Ohio. At this point, the law is that you need 50% plus one in order for a ballot measure to pass. So tonight, what happened was Republicans, conservatives, decided, in fact, to put a ballot measure on the ballot in which they tried to say, no. It's not 50% plus one you need. It's 60% plus one that you need. So all of a sudden, they were like, okay, we want to raise that bar for that abortion measure come November. So in this particular case, the no vote was saying, no, we want to keep it at 50% plus one. And what we saw was overwhelmingly the voters, in fact, said
so
no.
A simple majority versus a supermajority.
A supermajority, exactly right.
Okay. What did the numbers look like? How big did this go towards saying, no, we want to keep the Constitution the same?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's a blowout. It's a double-digit blowout. I mean, right now you can see what we're looking at essentially is a 13-point margin at this particular point. And keep in mind that Donald Trump won in the state of Ohio by 8 points. So all of a sudden you had this really red state in Ohio that voted for Donald Trump by 8 points saying no by about 13 points. And of course, no in this particular case, we believe is a proxy for saying that, in fact, abortion rights in the state of Ohio are, popular by, let's say, a 13-point margin.
There was certainly a lot of money spent to try and show voters what this really meant, because it is a bit confusing. Lauren, I want to ask you what your thoughts are about how potent this issue is. What does this tell us about how important this issue is to Americans?
Over and over again, we've been hearing pundits really since the Dobbs decision say that this issue is going to fade into the background, that it's the economy, that it's other issues. We heard that going into the 2022 midterms. They've been wrong again and again. This is the most salient, galvanizing political issue for women on the left, but also increasingly from our polls for independent women, which is why it's so powerful in states like Ohio, what we saw in Kansas, every single place in the country where we've had ballot measures since Dobbs, asking voters what they want in terms of abortion rights. They have voted in favor of abortion rights. And the fact that this vote in Ohio was such a blowout, to your point, I mean, it was not even close. In an August off-cycle single vote election, which was intentionally held in an off time when people are on vacation to try to keep them away from the polls, and yet folks turned out. And I think when we get into the gender data, when we start seeing what that looks like in the exit polls, we'll have a better sense of it. But there's no question in our polling, in poll after poll, abortion and guns actually are the two top issues for women voters going into this election. And the last thing I'll say on this is the maybe unexpected consequence of Dobbs has been the extent to which voters are paying attention to state politics. And Ohio has been a place that has, the democracy has been dying in darkness for years there. A lot of gerrymandering, a lot of, gamesmanship in the state legislature. Suddenly, since Dobbs, there and in states around the country, you're seeing voters hyper-focused on statewide elections. That is going to rewrite the map in a lot of ways for years to come.
I'm curious, Jeff, what you think about this. Is this a mistake for Republicans to focus on abortion because of some of the numbers that you've seen here? I do want to throw up a full screen to give you an idea of some recent polling that we have done. 64% of Americans disapprove of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And when you look at those numbers, it's Democrats and independent voters who seem to be the ones that are up for grabs, if you will, on this issue, who are saying, look, This is important to us. We really, really, really are going to pay attention to what people are saying about this issue. Should Republicans be pushing this issue if they're running for state office, if they're running for federal office?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that democracy was put on display here, right? The Supreme Court pushed this back to the states, and each state's going to have their own personality, their own leans towards policies one way or another. Ohioans spoke, and they spoke loudly with which direction they want to go with this. And also, these constitutional questions are really, really confusing. In fact, it's one of the most confusing things I dealt with in 10 years in state government. How you actually write the question, how you present it, double negatives, how it's delivered out into the populace. But from a Republican standpoint, I feel like this issue, we need to do a better job of being empathetic. We need to do a better job, regardless of pro-life, pro-choice. We need to be able to understand that single teenage girl who's pregnant and scared and worried. We need to be empathetic and understand instead of just trying to preach. We need to understand. I look at Georgia. We passed a heartbeat bill. Stacey Abrams used that as her cornerstone issue to beat Brian Kemp, and it really didn't become an issue because he wasn't trying to go out and poke fingers and make a point out of it. He was simply trying to pass foster care legislation to make things easier for the adoptive process.
I mean, every state in the country since Dobbs, that was before Dobbs, and I think the rules have been completely rewritten, and what you've seen is that across the board, this is an absolute loser for Republicans, and you look at what a liability it's becoming for people like Ron DeSantis, who had committed that they wouldn't change the laws in the state of Florida, then against the will of the vast majority of his own voters in the state of Florida, passed an extraordinarily restrictive bill. And that's what we're seeing, is that where it's passing against the will of a majority of the folks in that state. And even some Republican lawmakers, especially women lawmakers, are saying this is a loser for Republicans. Americans don't want this. And it's hard, I think, for Republican legislators to catch up to how much the national sentiment has changed since Dobbs. It's a totally different world from a year ago. The politics have shifted.
Coleman, do you think that this is going to continue to be the thing that propels people to go to the polls, one of the big issues that they are very concerned about when it comes to 2024 even?
Yeah, I think if we learn anything tonight, it's that there are a lot of independents and even some Republicans that they like Republicans on crime and on immigration, but on abortion, they really prefer the compromise position that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, and legal throughout the first trimester. I think we're going to keep seeing these people and their votes, and like you said, this could become a losing issue for Republicans.
You did see some people kind of pulling back from that. Harry, I want to talk to you about what happened since the Supreme Court overturned Dobbs. What's been happening across the country? How many places have, sort of come up with trying to change things in their state legislatures and their rules and have been knocked down?
Yeah, so, we've had 6 ballot measures since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and when it came to abortion sentiment. And on every single one of those instances, the pro-abortion right side won. And we're not just talking about blue states like Vermont and California. We're talking about red states, right? We're talking about places like Kansas. We're talking about places like the Dakotas. We've seen Montana. We've seen all of this type of stuff where we have seen clear instances in which abortion has been put on the ballot. And in those particular cases, what we have seen is the pro-abortion right side has won. And another little nugget that I'll sort of just drop in here is I was looking at some of the polling, and I looked at the voters who had voted for Barack Obama in 2012 and then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. Those voters who are key to Donald Trump's coalition come next year were actually more in favor of abortion rights than against it. That's something to keep in mind.
That's really, really fascinating. I want to keep the conversation going. However, we are getting this new information about Georgia and the potential that there may be another case coming down the pike from Fulton County and from the DA there. This has been talked about by Donald Trump ad nauseum. There is some fallout from the beginning. How are you feeling about all of this? Do you think that she is going to bring charges in this case?
Well, certainly the news broke yesterday that I actually did receive a subpoena for the additional grand jury that's going there. So I'll be limited in what I speak about. But certainly, yeah, it's trending in that direction, right? It's certainly that she's had months, if not years, to pull all of this together. I think it's not only going to be when, but who, and all those details around it. I mean, so much of this, as we unpack this, it's solutions in search of a problem that started in the Oval Office. I mean, I think that's really what this is all about. It would dream up some crazy concocted idea and then go try to find micro points and facts and send out some tweets and create a ground scurry. That's really what we saw play out, and it literally captured the attention of a country, an entire party, and even years removed, we're still affected by it.
I'm curious, are you talking about Donald Trump doing that, or are you talking about the Biden administration doing that?
Well, I'm talking specifically about the 2020 election cycle and Donald Trump in the Oval Office in his administration. To watch them continue to stir the pot and put us in such a bad political position where we're at today. I mean, this should be the easiest election cycle for Republicans to win the White House. Statistically speaking, it should easily be a layup for us, but we continue to put the weakest person, in my opinion, at the top of the list. But we still have time, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Do you think he has any chance of winning if he becomes the nominee?
I do not. I do not. I think it'd be the biggest gift ever. Every dollar written to Donald Trump goes, in my opinion, directly to Joe Biden's campaign account.
Jeff?
Diminishing returns. I mean, it's been diminishing returns on Donald Trump for years, and he's not gaining the electorate in any of this, right? You could talk all day long about why core Republican MAGA voters are unperturbed by these indictments, but fundamentally he can't grow his share of the electorate. And that's why, I think anyone who looks at the numbers says there's no universe in which Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. But setting that aside, I mean, Georgia's really, really interesting. So much of what the president has been claiming is that he can't get a fair trial and a fair grand jury in the city of Washington, D.C. because it's a blue city now. The case is going before a Georgia grand jury. Completely different political landscape. It's a purple state. Democrats narrowly won the state. It's going to be very hard for him to make those same. He will, but it's going to be very hard. And ultimately, this is a jury that will decide this. Fani Willis is serving the people of Georgia who faced the disenfranchisement of their vote. You okay?
Yes. I have something stuck in my throat.
I'll just keep talking.
Lauren, Coleman, Harry, Jeff, I think I got it all right. Thank you so much for that great discussion. I will try to stop choking on myself. Appreciate you guys having that discussion. Just ahead.